We're fortunate in having with us this afternoon from the Foreign Science and Technology Center, Mr. Mark Shapiro, who is Chief of the Aircraft and Infantry Weapons Branch of that agency. He will serve as the gunner this afternoon. Mr. Shapiro has military service in World War II, and since World War II has been employed by the government in the small arms technical intelligence field. He's an expert in the area. In addition, the narrator this afternoon is Mr. Harold Johnson, an international authority on the small arms of the world. And Mr. Johnson retired after 20 years in the Marine Corps and has been working in the small arms field for the past 9 years with the Foreign Science and Technology Center. He's recently completed a 2-volume set of small arms identification manuals, both Eurasian communist countries and free world weapons. They're the latest thing on the topic. In addition, he contributes periodically to the Defense Intelligence Summary and the Technical Intelligence Summary, bi-weekly, or every 2 weeks. He's also received acknowledgments from such people as W.H.B. Smith and other noted experts in the field. And what we're going to do this afternoon is show you the latest small arms, both Soviet or communist, Russian and Czech, and free world weapons. Some of the weapons that he'll show you, there are only a few in captivity. By that I mean the Soviet RPK. There are only 5 available in the free world. This is now the standard squad automatic in the Soviet Army. He's going to explain these things to you, and he's going to fire them for you. There'll be a question and answer period at the end. Thank you, Mr.
Do I need a microphone here? Okay. For many, many a year, people have been under the impression that insurgent forces use some old job that they dug out of the cellar or put together out of gas pipe. Up to about 1965, this wasn't too far from the truth. However, we noticed from about 65 to about 68 a tremendous change in the small arms weaponry that was available to various insurgent forces. No longer were they using homemade weapons, nor were they using ex-World War II junk. They were getting nothing but the best weapons from the communist world. Those insurgent groups that could not get communist weapons through various means were getting the latest manufactured free world weapons. So what we want to try and show you today is these very modern weapons that you may expect to find in an insurgency situation. First off, however, I want to tell you a little bit about some of these weapons, particularly the Russian weapons. Russian small arms are quite a bit different from ours because they meet a different military requirement than do ours. The Russians stress over and above everything in their small arms reliability. They want them to work all the time under all conditions. Weight is of secondary importance, so is accuracy. Their firing range is about 100 meters. The Russian tactical scheme, as it exists right now, and it has existed for about the last 7 or 8 years, basically envisions an assault from Russia to the English Channel. The Russians believe that once you launch an assault, you maintain the momentum of this assault. That if you have to stop and go to the defensive, this is a temporary situation and a highly undesirable situation, and you go back to the assault. Oh, I'm sorry. That when you have to stop your assault and go to a momentarily defensive position, this is an aberration. It's something to be not to be desired, and they want to start making the assault again as soon as possible. They have gone to a lot of trouble to provide very fine bridging equipment. Their tanks, for example, are capable of crossing any river in Europe on the bottom. They just hit the bank and put a snorkel up and go underneath and come out the other side. Their armored personnel carriers can swim, all of them, wheel to tracked, and swim pretty damn good. Now, to maintain this momentum of the assault that they place so much stress on, the Russians have no foot infantry. Every infantryman in the Russian army, or the Soviet army, and in the Warsaw Pact armies rides. And he rides in some type of an armored personnel carrier. Now, these APCs are a lot different from our 113s. They may be wheeled or they may be tracked. But one of the things they do have that our 113 does not have is they have holes in the side. And the riflemen inside, the machine gunners inside, stick their weapons through these holes and they fire. And they fire on the move. They assault with just jets of fire coming out of the side of these vehicles. What they are trying to do is to suppress our fire, to keep your finger off the trigger, to keep your head down. And to be honest with you, while no American has ever experienced this, I think it would be a very frightening sight to see 30 or 40 BTRs or BMPs come charging at you with things firing from every firing port. I would be tempted to stay down in the hole. Because of this particular technique that they use, this firing from a moving vehicle, with all its inherent inaccuracy, with just spraying the countryside, their weapons do not tend to be very accurate. The AK, for example, its maximum effective range in the hands of a really good marksman, and I don't care about you people in Vietnam and said you saw somebody hit at 500 yards, is about 200 meters. You really can't hit anybody beyond 200 meters with an AK. The Soviets never intended it to be used beyond that range. The standard Soviet squad organization is a little hard to define because there are at least 3 squads that we know of. There is a 6-man reconnaissance squad. This is generally armed with rifles, with AKs. There is also the 8-man motorized rifle squad. This is the most common squad in the Soviet Army. This 8-man squad has 6 AKM assault rifles, 1 RPK squad light machine gun, which is nothing more or less than an AKM fitted with a heavy barrel and a bipod, and an RPG-7 anti-tank grenade launcher. That last man has an AKM that he swaps with. This squad is, as I say, the normal squad. There is a new squad coming out that is associated with a new armored personnel carrier that we call the BMP. This squad is armed to the teeth. It's an 8-man infantry element in the carrier. There's 11 men in the carrier in all. They have still the 6 AKMs. However, they have 2 PK, general purpose machine guns. These roughly equate to the M60 ballistically. This is a pretty heavily armed squad. And again, they have the ubiquitous RPG-7 racked up on the roof of the vehicle. We'll show you these weapons this afternoon, and we will fire them a little bit. Mr. Shapiro will do the firing, and he will start the firing with the AKM assault rifle. Will you bring me the AKM, please? No, it's on the box. The far one, yeah. This is the standard assault rifle in the Soviet Army today, and in most of the Warsaw Pact armies except Czechoslovakia. The folding stock version as seen here is not a parachutist model especially, so much as it's designed for motorized infantry. It's a very compact weapon so that they can fire from within their armored personnel carriers. It holds normally a 30-round magazine. However, there is a 40-round magazine used with the RPK squad light machine gun that can be used in this, as can the 75-round drum. We have pictures of East German border guards carrying these folding stock weapons with the 75-round drum magazines in it. The standard bayonet for the weapon is shown here. The bayonet is a little unusual in its own right, in that it can be coupled to the scabbard, and it makes a fairly efficient wire cutter. You can go through most types of conventional barbed wire, and it is completely insulated so that you can cut through electrical barbed wire if necessary. The Soviet training on this weapon stresses automatic fire in 3 to 5 shot bursts. Once the Soviets get through their zeroing and preliminary marksmanship training, then and only then do they go, then is the only time that they will fire semi-automatic fire normally. Henceforth, their selectors stay in the middle position for full automatic fire. Now, Mr. Shapiro will fire a few shots from this in the semi-automatic mode, mostly to make sure the thing works. We haven't fired these in quite a while. and then he will finish the magazine up in the full automatic mode. It's all set, Mark. Pull the bolt on the back and let her snap. Okay. This will be a few shots in the semi-automatic mode, and then we'll finish it out fully automatically.
You're staying real close to that podium. That's where you're getting that squeaking from the stand off.
Fire a long burst, Mark. This is the RPK Squad Light Machine Gun. They call it a light machine gun, but really it's more of an automatic rifle. Tactically, it corresponds to our old Browning automatic rifle. Can you all hear me? This is probably the lightest machine gun in the world. It weighs a shade over 11 pounds as you see it here. The normal complement of ammunition for it is one 75-round drum magazine and three 40-round box magazines. The gun is basically an AKM fitted with a longer, heavier barrel, a somewhat different butt, and a bipod. Mechanically, the two weapons are interchangeable, and all the parts will swap back and forth, be it an AKM or an RPK. The training of this, the disassembly and assembly, is identical to the AKM, and this really simplifies things for the Soviets. The AK, as I mentioned, is accurate to about 200 yards against a point target. This weapon is used against area targets, and it's good to about 800 meters when you're beating up an area. It is lethal out to about that range. But at this range, it will throw over about 30 to 40 meter square dispersion. We fired these against U.S. helmets and armored vests at 800 meters. We're firing in the semi-automatic mode. We fired some 700 rounds and got about 5 hits on a U.S. steel helmet and armored vest at that range. And it will just barely penetrate a steel helmet or an armored vest. It's real marginal out there. This is a very good machine gun. It's a very light gun. It's compact. It's small. The Soviets apparently really like it. There is an airborne version of this with a hinge that the butt folds forward so that it can be used for jumping, to give a little more compact weapon when they jump. We'll fire this one in the full automatic mode only. This is the 75-shot drum magazine in it. Now, the standard Soviet motorized rifle company has 3 PK general purpose machine guns. This company has 3 PK general purpose machine guns. That's the gun you see on the tripod. The tripod is a relatively new tripod. We just obtained it about 3 weeks ago, and I don't even know what the model designation for it is. It's a very light tripod. It weighs 9 3/4 pounds. It has quite wide traverse limits. It has a pretty good elevation limit, and it also has a feature on it that I'll show you a little later to elevate the gun for anti-aircraft firing. The Soviets train their people to fire all of their weapons at aircraft. They fire AKs, the RPK, and the PK in an anti-aircraft mode. I suspect that if you have a rifle company firing at you in an airplane, you're in for kind of a hairy time. Let me go up with Mr. Shapiro on this gun for a minute and make sure that it's loaded properly, and we'll start off. I forgot to check the gas regulator on it. You're good. If you want to traverse any.
Huh?
If you want to traverse it any.
I don't hear you.
Here, it's set for traversing if you want to traverse slightly, but watch the...
Yeah, I'm just aiming down.
Behind. Okay. This gun has a gas regulator to adjust the rate of fire so that when you're firing it in the anti-aircraft mode, you can up the rate to about 1,000 rounds a minute. For normal firing, such as we have it now, it'll be about 650 rounds a minute. You'll notice it's a very steady gun. There's very little commotion when it's firing. This is we think is one of the best machine guns in the world. The gun weighs 17 pounds. The tripod weighs 9 3/4. It's an extremely simple gun. All the crew can do in maintenance on it is take the bolt out. There's no buffer in it. There's no backplate in it. And it's one of a family of machine guns. This is the latest model. This was the one we call the PKM. The original one, the PK, was about identical. It has a somewhat heavier barrel. It didn't have the butt rest. And there were a few other small changes on it. There's one called the PKT, has an electric solenoid that is installed in tanks and armored personnel carriers as a coaxial gun. And there's one called a PKB that had spade grips on it, shovel-type grips, for use in a flexible mount on some types of APCs. All of the guns have working parts that are interchangeable between one another, and they do have a quick-change barrel. The Warsaw Pact nations use the AKM, the RPK, and the PK machine guns almost exclusively, except for Czechoslovakia. The Czechs are showing their independence, and they have their own family of weapons. Their assault rifle is the Type 58 assault rifle, Model 58 assault rifle. It looks a lot like the AK, but it does differ from it. The mechanism is completely different. It uses a striker rather than a hammer for firing. It has a swinging wedge to lock the bolt, and a few other little features. One of the interesting things about these rifles, they are a great favorite with terrorist groups. I feel that any day we'll start seeing them show up in the United States. The Japanese who shot Lod Airport up were armed with these, and you see an awful lot of them out in the Mideast. One of the things about it is the fact that you can fold the stock and put it under any kind of a coat, and it's almost unseen. It's a very small, very compact weapon. It's not quite as reliable as the AK, but it is in pretty wide use. The Czechs also offer these to anybody who wants to buy them. We've recovered quite a few of these out of Vietnam. You find them in Laos, Cambodia, in through Burma, all through the Near East, all over the place. I saw a couple about 2 weeks ago that came out of the brand spanking new ones that were made about a year ago that came out of one of the Near Eastern countries. Never been fired. This one is a fairly old one here. This is 1963 production. But they've been making them since 1958, and all in all, they are pretty fair weapons. One of the interesting things about these is the selector markings. Most of the AKs, depending on the country that make it, have a symbol in the alphabet of the country who made it. The Russians have a Cyrillic A for automatic fire, a P for semi-automatic fire. On these Czech weapons, they don't do that. They have a number. They have number 1 for semi-automatic fire, which means when you pull the trigger, it'll fire one shot. And for full automatic fire, they have a number 30. It means it fires 30 shots, fires the magazine out. They assume that people do not know all the various alphabets, and some of the people who buy them may have an alphabet different from someone else's. So if they stamp them like this, they feel that anybody gets them will be able to figure out what the selector means. In the middle is safe. This one will fire in the full automatic mode. For some reason, the Czechs use the same cartridge as the Russians, but their magazines aren't interchangeable. They look very similar, but they are very definitely different. This will be fired automatically only. It's got a lot more kick than the AK, and it fires quite a bit faster. The rate of fire on this is about 700 to 750 rounds a minute. It's very similar to the M1 carbine, or M2 carbine, pardon me. In addition to the Model 58 assault rifle, the Czechs also issue a machine gun. They have nothing comparable to the RPK. They do issue some bipods for use on their 58s, but generally their squad machine gun is the Type 59, the Nix gun over there. This gun fires the long rim cartridge, the same cartridge as does the PK. It's quite a powerful cartridge, and the gun is unique in that it has a push-out belt. It pushes the rounds forward like our M60 machine gun does, but it handles a rimmed round. Nobody ever figured that they would ever run a rim round through a push-out belt, but the Czechs figured how to do it, and the gun works pretty well. It's a fairly heavy gun. It's about 19 pounds as it sets there. It's an extremely simple gun. The parts are large and rugged. Nothing ever seems to break on it. That particular gun that you see here was used for a full-scale test. It was given the same test as we give our M60 machine gun, and it was subject to salt water, sand, mud, rain, ice, the whole bit, and it ran a real good test. And it ended up really not in too bad a shape. It's still serviceable. Generally speaking, when a gun runs to this test, it becomes unserviceable somewhere in the course of the test. We had no spare parts, and we broke nothing in our tests. Let me go up with Mr. Shapiro now and make sure that the regulator on this one is set right and that it is loaded properly. Okay, we're set right on the regulator. Okay. Unloading this one, Mark. Got to.
That's how you cut.
If you have any malfunction, just say to hell with it.
And what happens now?
It's all set to go.
It's fired, huh?
Let's shoot. Remember what I said about holding her in under here?
Right.
This gun is unusual also in that there's no operating handle on it. You slide the trigger guard back and forward to cock it. That's the low setting of the gas regulator. This gun also has an anti-aircraft mount for it, and we set it on the high setting. The cyclic rate goes up to about 1,200 rounds a minute. You can't distinguish the individual shots. You also can't control the gun. It's just out there spraying. The People's Republic of China, until recently, used copies of Soviet weapons. They have, however, come up with their own family of weapons recently. They have a new assault rifle, the Type 68 assault rifle that first saw the light of day sometime in 1968, and a new machine gun, the Type 67 machine gun. We have a gun, but unfortunately in the process of obtaining it, somebody ran a M113 over it, and it's not too serviceable. We've never been able to get another one. We do have a number of the Type 68 assault rifles, and I brought one with me this morning. Unfortunately, the people in the field who collected these things neglected to get any magazines for us, so I'm using a modified AK-47 magazine in it that somewhere along the lines has picked up a dent. So I can only fire about 10 rounds out of this one. This is the Chi-Com Type 68. It looks a lot like the old SKS. I'm sure many of you are familiar with, a little bulkier possibly. It has the folding bayonet, so common on the SKS. One of the big changes it has is the breech mechanism is very similar to the AK-47 assault rifle, and it has selective fire. It can be fired either fully or semi-automatically. We'll fire this one a few shots in the semi-automatic mode, and then we'll go to the full automatic mode. Go to full. Unfortunately, we're somewhat limited on the magazine capacity here. This is good for about 300 to 400 meters, firing the semi-automatic mode. We suspect the Chinese went to this rifle because they generally were dissatisfied with the AK-47 or the AKM. They do make a copy of the AKM in the People's Republic of China now. These are essentially short-range weapons, and they do have a rather short bayonet. The Chinese basically are still a foot infantry army. They have very few mechanized units, and they need something with a bit longer range than the AK. We've picked up indications of quite a bit of dissatisfaction with the AK for them, and we think this is why this rifle was designed and adopted by them. One of the weapons we picked up in Vietnam, and a rather unusual one, was a Type 64 silenced pistol. Will you bring me the pistol with the white grips? Yeah. And the little magazine. This pistol is the Type 64 silenced pistol. It's an assassination weapon, pure and simple. It fires a .32 caliber cartridge. I might add a special one. And our supplies of ammunition are quite limited. This pistol is unique in a lot of ways. First off, it's the only pistol that was ever evacuated officially out of Vietnam. Every other pistol was captured there, ended up in somebody's pocket. It also was intended to use to kill Vice President Humphrey when he was over there. The man that this was taken off of was detailed to get him, to assassinate him. It's a very quiet pistol. We've checked it out quite thoroughly. We don't understand really why it's as good as it is, but it is extremely quiet. Now, this you fire standing up, and I think Mr. Shapiro deserves a little rest, so I'll fire the few rounds out of this one. Actually, the main reason I'm firing is I'm not sure on the ammunition how well it's going to work, and I want to be able to clear the jams myself on it. Sir? Who manufactured it? It was made in China. Made in mainland China. This burns my ass, Mark.
Is this the one you made?
You know what happened?
What?
The people at Rock Island took the firing pin out of it.
You're kidding.
Gentlemen, I have to apologize. I also just got back from Rock Island. For reasons known only to them, they've removed the firing pin from it. So I'm afraid I can't fire it today. These are some of the things we have to put up with. They worry about weapons out there and do take things out of them. I'm sorry. In the free world, insurgent groups end up with all sorts of weapons, either through capture or through purchase. Next to the M14 rifle and the M16 rifle, the most common weapons are the FN, the so-called FN-FAL, and the West German G3. The FN is a Belgian weapon. It's probably disseminated more than any other rifle in the free world. There are some 35 to 40 countries using the FN as their standard weapon. The one I have here is a C1, the Canadian version of it, made up in Long Branch in Canada. And it's a semi-automatic version only. Most of these have a full automatic capability. However, like most shoulder weapons firing the NATO cartridge, if you fire fully automatic, you can't expect to hit anything after the first round. They're almost completely uncontrollable. Let me get Mr. Shapiro over here. And do you have the magazine for it? No. Give her hell. These are 20-shot weapons, and their effective range is about 400, 500 meters, roughly. These rifles are made in Belgium, and the Belgians offer them for sale to anybody who wants them. There's a number of insurgent groups in the United States that have these things. A few years back, I testified out on the West Coast against a Minuteman unit out there that had a training exercise that involved the holding up of a bank. Leastwise, that's the excuse they used when the police scoffed them up in the bank. And they were armed almost exclusively with FNs. We had quite a time on that one. The Belgian company, Fabrique Nationale FN, does sell their weapons around the world, and they have basically 4 weapons in their line now. The biggest seller, of course, is the FN-FAL, such as the one you just saw fired. They also offer a very fine machine gun, a little heavy, but a very reliable one. Watch, it probably won't work. But normally it is an extremely reliable gun called the MAG. This weapon has been adopted by the UK under their designation as the L7 machine gun, and is also the standard machine gun of the Israeli Armed Forces. It basically is a Browning automatic rifle hooked up to operate on a belt feed device. Then let me go over with Mr. Shapiro, make sure that everything is set right on it, and we'll give her a go. Pull the bolt back first. Okay, you're good. Okay. The rate of fire, this one, normally is about 650, 700 rounds a minute, somewhere in there. It varies, however, from gun to gun, and also varies on how the gas regulator is set. The British also still use the Bren gun. This gun first saw the light of day in Czechoslovakia in the 1920s, and has been steadily improved over the years, and there are any number of British officers to this day will tell you that the Bren is still the best machine gun in the world. The British started modifying these a few years back and converting them to handle the NATO cartridge, and they called the converted gun the L4. It's still in use. It's still a major gun for the UK, and it is still just as fine a machine gun as it was during World War II. It's a little on the heavy side, but it does work. It does work very, very well. The Bren is unique among modern machine guns in that it still has a semi-automatic fire capability. This is a newly overhauled gun. It hasn't had too many rounds fired through it, and I'm really not sure how reliable it will. The magazine is a 30-shot magazine, and it's good against an area target to about 800 meters. Sergeant, could I have the G3? Next to the FN, the West German G3 is probably one of the most widely distributed rifles in the world. I think the countries that don't use the FN do use the G3. This is kind of like a sheet metal monster. All the parts are pressed. But all in all, it is a very good rifle. It has a very unique system of operation. It operates on blowback. It has no gas cylinder, no recalling barrel, and just the pressure of the cartridge blows the bolt open. There's a mechanical contrivance in it to hold the bolt shut until the gas pressure drops to a safe limit. Unlike the FN, these are always full automatic or semi-automatic. They don't make a semi-automatic version of this for military purposes. This particular FN looks in G3 looks in very good condition. Unfortunately, it's been used by the Philadelphia Proof House in the testing of ammunition, and the barrel was pretty well shot on it. It was the only one we could lay our hands on right now. So there will be a good bit of muzzle flash from this one. But even this one has probably had about 20,000 rounds through it as it sits right now. But even so, it is a fairly reliable rifle, and they work and work and work. We are continually amazed at where these rifles are showing up and who are making them. We know they're made in West Germany, Sweden, Norway, Portugal, Burma, Nigeria, Indonesia. They just keep turning up. It seems like almost every week a new country comes up with the capability of manufacturing these rifles. This is a 7.62 NATO version. There's also a 5.56 version. It's a little smaller. There are also machine guns and automatic rifles designed on this mechanism that have about an 80% parts interchangeability, irrespective of caliber or type of weapon. As such, from a logistic viewpoint, it offers all sorts of advantages, as it does from a training viewpoint. Now, it's set for semi-automatic. Fire a few and then go to full. We'll fire a few shots in the semi-automatic mode and then go to the full automatic mode. By the way, when the demonstration is over, you all will be free to come up and look at these weapons, of course. We'll try and answer any questions, and also, hopefully, possibly a chance maybe to fire a few of them. Go to full automatic, Mark. These weapons have a rather rugged ejection, if you notice. The empties will go about 20 feet. This is due to the blowback type mechanism. You get them in the front and in the side at the same time. The Spaniards make a version of this rifle that is chambered for the NATO cartridge, but their version of the NATO cartridge is loaded only about 70% as powerful as our cartridge. And when you get one of these and don't catch on that it's a Spanish one and start running our full-fledged ammunition through it, it's really a startling experience. The empties go 50 and 60 feet through the air, and they whistle like mad as they go. And I picked up one from a 2x4 that was by the range we were firing that was buried all the way into the neck, into the 2x4. I mean, it's really a violent gun. I got out of a little sequence. I forgot about this one. This is FN's newest rifle, the so-called CAL. This is a very early one. This is gun number 15. This is the 15th one they ever made. There are some changes, mostly in the handguard and a few very minor mechanism changes. This is their idea of what a 5.56 should be. FN was in somewhat of a dilemma because they had a good thing going in their big FNs. They've got orders for the next 5 or 6 years on them, and they didn't want to come out with a new rifle and say that this is better than their old one. So they don't call this a rifle. This is a carbine, according to them. It fires our 5.56 ammunition, and unlike most 5.56s, this has several trigger options. You have full automatic, semi-automatic, and what we think is a very good idea, a 3-shot burst. Fires 3 shots and stops. That way you keep the young, more or less untrained rifleman from blazing one magazine out at each pull of the trigger. We'll fire this one in the semi-automatic and then in the 3-shot mode. Switch from here to here. That weighs about just a shade under 7 pounds. It's slightly heavier than the M16. It's all steel construction. FN really isn't doing too good on selling these. They made up about 5,000 of them, and they have the greater part of those still in stock. It's an extremely expensive rifle. They're $200 and some odd a piece, and they really can't compete with the H&K or with the M16 that are running anywhere from roughly 100 to 100 and a quarter. I'm sorry I got a sequence on that one. During World War II, the Germans came out with a machine gun they call the MG42 that generally was widely acclaimed as one of the best machine guns in the world. It was a rather simple gun, and it was one of the few German guns that really worked, and worked under all conditions, under all climes, and gave them a minimum amount of trouble. When the war was over, and they started to rearm and everything back in 1959, one of the things they decided to do was to take their old MG42 and modernize them, and they called the modernized gun the MG1. This has gone through a number of minor variations. The one we have today is an MG1A3, and it is prime different from the old World War II guns is the fact that this gun fires the 7.62 NATO ammunition. Like the World War II guns, it's got a real fast rate of fire. It's firing close to 1,000 rounds a minute. This is a relatively new gun. It may not fire quite that fast. We've only had about 2,000 or 3,000 rounds to this one, but you will see that it is quite a fast-firing gun all in all. This is the standard weapon for the West German Army, for the Italians, for the Spaniards. A number of other smaller nations also use it, including Luxembourg, who has 10 of them. Let me go over and make sure everything is proper on it. Okay, pull the bolt back first. I'll load it for you. Okay. Get down, I'll load. Get down in position. You ready? Now remember what I said. This one goes like a bat out of hell. Let it rock back and forth on the bipod.
Okay, just let it go out, huh?
Mm-hmm. Wait a second.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
Huh?
Yeah, go ahead. Mark, lean forward into it. Push forward into it, Mark. These guns, both in the NATO caliber and in the old German 7.92s, are pretty widely found in the hands of insurgent units in and around the North Africa area. There's a lot of them in use in Angola and through there. We see pictures of them almost every day. Don't see very many of them down South America. Most of the countries have bought one or two of them to look at, but they don't seem to be in general use down there. It is kind of a shooting gun. We brought along a couple of silent weapons with us that we thought you might like to see. These have all sorts of use in various, both in counterinsurgency, in urban warfare, and in general reconnaissance use. Mark, if you bring the two over here, the two silent guns, the Sterling and the MP5 behind you, and the magazines for them. Let me have the Sterling, Mark. You know, the worst thing about giving a briefing out in the open air with this microphone array is I'm afraid one of these days I'm going to strangle myself. This is the British Sterling. This is the L-34 model. It's a standard British Army weapon, and it is right now almost exclusively used by the Royal Marines, and the Royal Commanders also use them. It is an almost completely silent weapon. The British during World War II issued a version of the Sten known as the Mark IIS, which was a silent Sten that was an extremely efficient silent weapon. However, it required quite a bit of maintenance, and after about every 300 to 400 shots, certain parts had to be replaced in it. When the British wrote their mil specs for this one of the things they insisted on was that it require no maintenance, that it be maintenance-free. And they've pretty well accomplished that in this gun. I think I'll give Mr. Shapiro a break, and I'll fire this one a little bit, because it can be fired standing up. There goes the garrote again. I'll fire this a few shots in the semi-automatic mode and then go to full automatic on it. It's about 9 pounds. It's a fairly heavy weapon.
Does it have a bolt silencer at all?
Pardon?
Have a bolt silencer?
No. The Brits did put a bolt silencer on some of the earlier models. However, they decided that the fact that the thing that silenced the bolt had to be replaced at intervals, it was a nylon disc, that they decided to do away with it and accept a little bit of noise from the bolt clanking. The same people that make the G3 also make this. This is the MP5. This is a West German gun, and it normally exists in the form of a standard submachine gun. It's about that long. This particular version is the latest one, and it is a silenced one. We've done some very limited firing with this one, and we found that it is a very effective silencer. Now I'll fire this one the same thing, a few shots in the semi-automatic mode, and then go to the full automatic mode. Most of the noise you hear on this one when it's firing is bolt noise and a certain amount of noise from the bullet striking the target. This gun is an unusual one. This gun is an unusual one for a submachine gun, and it fires from a closed bolt. The only thing that moves when you fire it is the hammer. And something even more unusual, they have telescopic sight pads on it. I fired the regular submachine gun. It ranges out to about 200 meters, and it shoots just like a rifle. You can hold about a 12-inch group at 200 meters using the scope on it with the 9mm Parabellum. It's a very, very good little gun. And they also seem to work quite well. We have a number of pistols with us. Mr. Shapiro, if you'd bring the Browning. However, I think in the interest of time, I'm going to let go firing them, and we'll just show you what we have. We also have one other odd weapon. It's a silenced weapon. It's a fairly old one. It goes back to World War II days. This is the Well Rod. It's a 9mm. There's also a .32 caliber version of it, and it's a manually operated weapon. You actuate it between shots. It's also a very effective silent weapon. Very quiet for a 9mm. Let me have the Walther too. I'm sorry. And the magazine for it. Oh, whoop, never mind. Just bring me some 9mm ammo. The West Germans make a pistol that used to be called the P38. They refer to it as the P1 now. And a few years back, they made a silenced version of it. I have it here. Somebody, about a week ago, I believe, walked off with my magazine for it. No, I don't have one for it right now. And I will fire it a few rounds in the single-shot mode for you. Yeah, it's a little noisy. Generally, it's not the best silencer in the world. There are a number of pistols in use in the world. The most common one, of course, is the so-called Browning High Power that's been in production since around 1935. There are any number of different models of these. This particular one's about, maybe 8 or 9 years old. They're very popular with insurgent groups because they hold 14 cartridges. It's a standard weapon for the United Kingdom, for Belgium, Holland, and a few other nations. They are good, simple, reliable pistols. The Russians issue this. This is their standard service pistol, the so-called Makarov. It's a very small pistol, similar in size to the old P-38. It's double action if you desire, and it has one of these startling hammer-dropping safeties that when you put it on safe, it drops the hammer. It fires a rather small cartridge, similar to our 380 or the 9mm short pistol cartridge. It's not a very effective pistol. Unfortunately, we can't fire it today for the reason we have no ammunition for it. Cartridges for these are quite hard to come by. But this is the Makarov. This particular one happens to be of East German manufacture, but they are made in the Soviet Union, East German, and the People's Republic of China that we know of. The older pistol was the famous old Russian Tokarev, the so-called TT-33. What have they done to me? Which basically is a very highly modified 1911 Browning. It fires a 30 caliber or 7.62 pistol cartridge. It's a rather miserable thing to fire because it's got quite a bit of kick and bang when it goes off. These are pretty well phasing out. You don't see them too often anymore because the Makarov seem to be issued. Pistols as a military weapon are generally starting to disappear. It's real rare that you find anybody in a combat unit officially carrying a pistol in any foreign nation anymore. But the only people that carry them are senior officers and usually tank drivers, not even tank commanders. They usually carry some kind of a rifle or a submachine gun. Pistols generally are definitely dying out. Gentlemen, I'm concluding my presentation now. I'm sorry about some of the problems we have with the weapons, but, you know, it's the way it goes. It's like the guy with the trained seal that followed Mae West doing a striptease. You know, some things are real hard to follow. If you have any questions, I will try and answer them. Sir.
Captain Hilton, on U.S. weapons, can you tell us anything about the development of any new family of weapons that will match some of the stuff that you've shown here?
Basically, the U.S. has underway right now a development program for a squad automatic weapon, to match the RPK, for a future rifle that has just died. I mean, TRADOC did not reevaluate the requirement for it, and for a firing port weapon to use in the new armored personnel carriers, similar to this. Basically, and this is an opinion, my own personal opinion, it's not my center's, the government's opinion, that the Soviet Union will cross the year 2000 with the weapons you saw here today, and the U.S. will cross into the year 2000 with the M16 rifle and the M60 machine gun. We appear to be going into a period of peace right now, and there just is no money available for weapons development. Any other questions? Sir.
Where does the M60 machine gun compare with some of
The M60 compares very closely to the PK machine gun. This is from a ballistic viewpoint. Both rounds, the cartridge that this fires and the cartridge that the M60 fires, our NATO cartridge, are almost ballistic twins. They both have the same weight bullet within a grain weight and within a very few meters per second the same muzzle velocity. That gun is a little lighter than the M60, is about the only major difference between them. Mechanically, there's nothing, they're, of course, completely different. But from a tactical viewpoint, when used in the motorized rifle regiment, they're used just like the M60 machine gun. When they're used in the so-called assault squad with the two of them in the squad, this is kind of a horse of another color, and they provide a very, very powerful base of fire for the Soviet assault squad.
But how do the two machine guns compare in reliability and maintenance?
I can't give you any honest figures on the PK guns because we haven't had them that long to really give them a complete ring out. Again, this just isn't the company position, but I think they're going to have to go a long way to get something much more reliable than an M60. The M60 is kind of heavy, but it works and works and works and works. I mean, it's real rare that M60s have any major malfunction with them. You occasionally will run into a bad cartridge or somebody's dropped it in the mud or something like this, and no gun's going to work under those conditions. But the M60 is a damn reliable gun. It's got a very good reputation by everybody that has used it both in the U.S. and in foreign countries. Most foreign countries don't like it. It's too damn expensive. It's a tremendously expensive gun.